Hey everyone, welcome. So glad to see you here. Welcome to Bulb Digital Office Hours. We do this the first Wednesday this month, second Wednesday of every month. Mike was on vacation last week, like many other spring breakers, and enjoyed a lot of seafood that I'm jealous of.
Apparently, people couldn't do this without me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we figured more people would be here this week, so 1 week later, if this is your first time here, welcome. This is basically a way for us to say, open our doors and invite people in to ask any questions that they're stuck on and things that we might be able to help them get unstuck on, particularly around the idea of using technology at your workplace better, bringing more modern tools into your working process, and we specialize in the Microsoft 365 space. So feel free to drop any questions that you have regarding that in the chat. I do want to make you aware of a couple things. We do this in both a Microsoft Teams meeting as well as on YouTube. So if you see us answering chats that you don't see, it's because we're looking at the different meeting, but we will read everything out loud so that everyone is on the same page. And then for those of you in the Teams meeting, if you post any questions where it would make sense to come off mute and talk through your situation, you're welcome to just raise your hand, and then we'll allow you to come off mute and have a little chat. So let's see. Anything else before we get started? Why don't you start with dropping where you are joining us from in chat so that we can see that you see us, hear us, and we can kind of know who's joining us today. And then we will get into, we do have a couple questions that came in. This is maybe some info. If you ever have questions where you're like, I can't make it to office hours, but I would love them to answer it. If you go to bulb.digital/office hours, we have a form there where you can just drop questions whenever you want, and we'll cover them in our next office hours. So we have a couple that came in that way, and we'll tackle those when we get to those. Oh yeah, Christina's from the Caribbean. I was kind of close to you about a month ago. I was in Dominican and much warmer places with no responsibility. So yeah, getting lost in a daydream right now. Okay. It is nice here though now. We're enjoying warmer weather up in Michigan.
Spring is here, right?
Yes. So Bahamas until yesterday. Oh man. I was in Bahamas too. That place was different. It was pretty good, but it was, I'm not a huge fan of the port there, but nice weather, nice beaches, good stuff. Okay. Let's get into our first question. This is from Kaylin Cross. So let's see, Kaylin is in the meeting with us. So the question they left is, good morning. I've been following your videos for a bit and have learned so much. Oh, good, thank you. But haven't quite found what I'm looking for. I am working on developing a model-driven app that collects multiple entries of data with each form. A list of entries with typical data at the top that will carry into the entries below. Something like timesheet creation with manual entry of time with selections for workers from a lookup table I've already developed. Data will be used for many purposes, so it needs to be detailed by the worker. How would you give me guidance? Any assistance would be greatly appreciated. Thank you in advance. Mike knows a thing about model-driven apps. Is the thing that she's looking for, is model-driven apps the tool that she should be looking at? How would you approach that similar
Well, the way
problem?
that she structured the question, it leads me to believe that maybe model-driven apps isn't good enough on its own to give the desired end user experience that you're looking for. So out of the box model-driven apps, the control that you would use, that you would drop onto your form, would be a subgrid control. And then the user who would be entering things in that subgrid would basically have to enter those things basically one at a time. And so they'd create new time entry, let's say, and then they would have to create a new one and a new one and a new one. That's probably not the ideal way to enter that data. So an alternative would be to build a Canvas app that delivers the user experience that you care about, that would be connected to the record for the form that the user finds themselves on. And so then you would embed that Canvas app into that form, and then you would give the user whatever experience you wanted to give them. So you could give them, you could use any of the Canvas app controls. So you could use a data grid if you wanted to, and they could enter things right into that data grid. There is data grid entry capability inside of the model-driven app, but to me, it kind of sounds like you want to guide them through the entry of each one of those things and collect the right detail, and maybe even apply some rules. And so you might want to explore the Canvas app option.
Okay, so let's break that down step by step. So model-driven apps out of the box probably aren't going to deliver the user experience. And so what we have done in those situations in the past is use Canvas apps, build it to look and feel how you want it, and then take that Canvas app and put it within a model-driven app that connects to the same data that the model-driven app was going to.
Yeah, so essentially you build the Canvas app to handle multiple time entries. That's the thing you're trying to manage. And then they're fed by a given parent record, be it the employee or an employee's particular week or whatever, or date. It might be a date that they're entering time for, like individual, I worked an hour on this and a half hour on that kind of a thing. Just depends on your scenario. But you would basically be connecting it to that parent, the entity that's identified in the parent form. And there are tutorials online how to do that. And I think we probably even have, maybe Michaela's got a video on how to connect that. I think we have like embedding a Canvas app in your model-driven app somewhere on our YouTube channel.
And we might have had that on a list, but I don't know if we made it.
Well,
we lose track of them now. There's like 150 videos or something.
I've posted stuff in our community that's related to embedding some of the difficulties, because you have to, when you embed the Canvas app in the model-driven app, you have to do it by a super secret name, the logical name of the Canvas app, not just the display name. Otherwise, it doesn't honor your...
There's some tricks.
Yeah, there's little tricks there that we've documented here and there.
Okay, so Kaylin is in the meeting. She said, thanks. I was looking at this as an option. Yeah, let us know how that goes. It definitely, from what I haven't seen it or worked with it, but from what I've heard with Mike and Michaela on our team, they really like dropping those Canvas app elements in when model-driven apps leave a little bit to be desired.
Yep. Yeah, we're doing quite a few cool things through that mechanism.
Cool. So thanks for the question, Kaylin. I'm going to move on to Brandon Berg is on YouTube. Good to see you, Brandon, from Tacoma, Washington. His question is, what are your initial thoughts on the new planner and the roadmap/updates that Microsoft has shared for the tool in their recent webinars/AMAs?
Here's your chance, Mitch. Somebody's asking you to tell them
I know.
how you really feel.
What you should know is I sat down. Benjamin is sitting right next to the camera, and he had to listen to me vent for, 20 minutes or so about the new planner yesterday.
It's a little bit of a confessional.
Yeah, and it was a moment. So he's editing that video right now, and it will hopefully see the light of day somewhat soon, because it is a big topic. It's an opportunity for Microsoft to make something really great out of something that has been a little bit lacking before. If I'm going to give my concise feedback, it is, if you love Planner as it is today, and you love Project for the Web as it is today, and you just wish that they integrated a little bit together better, and you're fine working within the confines of each of those tools individually, you're going to love it, because that's the point. They're integrated together. They talk to each other. They bring all the tasks into one task list. As far as the features, like, this is not a time where Microsoft is saying, you know what, Planner has fallen short in the past, and we need to fix the core functionality there and make it really great and incorporate Project for the Web in the process. It's almost entirely the latter, unfortunately. They say they have stuff in their backlog and on their roadmap and things like that, but it is very much what feels like passive implementation of those features over time. So I'm really hopeful that like a year from now, I look back and I'm like, oh, I didn't have anything to worry about. They made some good changes, and they're starting this investment process. In my opinion, they're missing an opportunity because they like made a new logo for the thing, and like they're rebranding it as this new tool. How awesome would it have been to say, here's the new planner. Everything that people have been asking us for is fixed. Like better commenting, better notifications, better activity feed, adding extra fields to tasks, like things that would just give you that one extra little step of configurability, or not be so stuck in the way that I think the Microsoft politics are sort of forcing them into. And
I look at it as like there's a few little extra things, and if they added it, it's the political question is an interesting one, because it's like, oh, did somebody realize that if they added those things that you're talking about, that they would not be able to sell their other project management tools?
Yeah.
Right? Because everybody wants the free version, and it's a great thing to have good functionality for free. But if you added those other things, like, is it free still? You know?
Yeah, it feels like they're pitching Copilot pretty big on it, and the information that I gleaned, actually, they answered my question about it, which was, hey, I have Microsoft 365 Copilot. I get Copilot in Planner, right? And the answer was, they sort of sidestepped it, but it was very much right now in the preview, you have to have Project Plan 3 in order to get Copilot. We don't have anything else to announce at this time. And it was like, just be real with me, like break down that wall for a second, and they didn't take the opportunity to do that. So that was a little bit of a bummer for me. The other maybe closing thought I'll take up the whole time talking about Planner if you let me. There is a lot of good that is coming from Project for the Web into Planner. Like the concept of being able to graduate your plan and do something more complex is cool. I have my own little gripes about how you have to go about that. But what's happening now is people who are used to the enterprise level project, Microsoft Project, like the formal tool, is now asking about all of the things that are in Project, like roadmaps and milestones and lead lag indicators. When are those going to make their way into Planner? And in my opinion, it taints what Planner could be, because it's creating noise for the product team to focus on those more complex things than getting some of the core functionality really good. And the people aren't wrong for asking about those things, but in my opinion, it all of a sudden makes Planner this really wide tool that has something at its core that needs some attention. Brandon says, I'll gladly listen to an hour of Planner talk. Well, yeah, watch out for my video. I have actually a couple planned that you might enjoy. So we'll move on from there. Feel free to drop any other clarifying thoughts or questions or anything about Planner. But for now, let's move on to Christina left a question over in Teams. She's asking, as far as I know, it's a Power Automate question. How do you identify hours within a selected hour range? For example, Power Apps, sorry. I'm building an overtime app where I'm allowing the user to enter a start and end time. I'm trying to figure out how to get the time ranges between the start and end time to state when time and a half kicks in and when double time kicks in. I can't use date diff function as I'm asking for a time range instead of the particular finish times. So the before I hand that to Mike, we like to prompt. You don't have to ask a super technical question. You can ask whatever kind of question you want to ask. The thing that we've seen in the past is when people ask questions like this is that it's like, oh my gosh, I'm asking a beginner question. I can't ask that. And no one is wrong in this situation. I encourage you to leave whatever questions you want, whatever you need help with. So in this case, it's maybe a more technical date diff. How do we figure out dates in Power Apps? Are we trying to strong arm something into doing something that is maybe more complex than it's built for, or what do we think?
So Power Apps is a general category. One of the things, like I very recently worked to solve a similar problem. And on the model-driven app side of things, you now have something that you can use called a formula column. So it's meant to ultimately replace the calculated column option. But in a formula column, you can use essentially like PowerFX or Power Query, and you can do calculations on things. So if you have a start and an end time, you can actually do a difference from the end to the start and calculate a numeric value. So one of the things you said is like, I'm asking for a time range instead of the particular finish times. I think what you mean by time range is like how much time has elapsed between, the end and the start, or the start and the end. And so if you're doing that, you could calculate a duration. And I'm pretty sure that the function used on the model-driven side is like a date diff. And it's the same thing that you would use on the Power BI side as well. And it's a date diff, and you specify the interval. So in this case, you could specify days or months or minutes or whatever that might be. And so then once you have that number, then you can do the additional calculation that would be based on whatever your overtime rules are for time and a half and for double time. So you'd calculate everything, let's say over 10 hours as being double time, and then everything, over 8 hours up to 2, if 10 is your double time limit, as time and a half, and then the rest up to 8 would be your regular time. So that would be something that I would look at. I don't know if you want to clarify whether or not you're doing a Canvas app. Or
she was just typing, if Livy or maybe Benjamin, if you could allow her microphone and let us know when she's able to chat, she's welcome to. While we're doing that, I just want to reset the room. If anyone's joining us just now and getting in here wondering, what are you guys?
Christina, you can.
Cool.
Allowed it.
Thanks, Benjamin. If you're just joining us, you're welcome to drop any questions that you have about Microsoft 365. We're here. There's no agenda outside of let us know what you're working on, what you need help with, what you're stuck on, and we'll do our best to get you unstuck. So Bhargav also has a question he would like to ask off mute. So let's go to Christina first, and then we'll work on Bhargav.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Right. So basically, you're asking the user for when they started overtime, so when they end overtime, right? So for us, we have overtime as time and a half from 4 to 8, and then double time from 8 p.m. to 12 a.m., right? Mm-hmm. So the trick there now is if let's say they put 4 to 10, how am I to calculate the fact that 4 to 8 get the hour duration? So it's supposed to calculate that 4 to 8 is time and a half, and then from 8 to 10 will be double time.
Okay, so you're saying that the decision to pay time and a half or double time is not based on the number of hours they work, but rather the time of the day during which they work?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's different than what I'm used to. Okay, so
that's 8 to 4 is standard time. So yep. If they work after 4, that's where time and a half will kick in, and then after 8 is double time.
I want a job with you guys. I just work the night shift and I get double time.
Yeah.
So I think let me just think about that a little bit. The way that I would do that would be, So you're going to have to, are you storing dates in like local time or UTC? Do you know that answer?
Yeah, in local time. So I think I have it pulled in from the machine local time, or I have it, well, when they enter, let's say they enter 8 to 4 and they select PM, I have on submit, I put in it in military time. So given is 1, it'll store as 13 because I think that's
Yep.
how database reads it.
Yep. So
Right.
24-hour time.
Yeah.
I don't know about the Power Apps world, but I can at least from a code like algorithm standpoint, I would take the end time, get the hour of the end time, check if greater than 8. If so, compare those, like subtract 8, take the remaining hours. That's
Yeah.
how many.
Yeah. So
And then do the same thing
Yep.
down.
So you have to figure out what it straddles, right? Like what Mitch was saying. So it would be something like take that military time, that 24-hour time that you're getting, and figure out if it's greater than your double time cutoff. Okay.
If the hour,
Right.
I would focus on the hour if you can.
Yeah, but then
I don't know if
you
you
got to
can.
if you take your 24-hour time and you boil it all into minutes of the day, then you could like count the minutes in the day.
Sure,
Right? There's 20,
sure.
24 times
Pick your
60,
your
right?
unit.
And then figure out when your double time cutoff is, and figure out when your time and a half cutoff time is. And then if the number for the end time is greater than the double time cutoff, then you need to do the math for how many minutes, right? Units are between the end time that they put in, the top minute, and the double time cutoff. And that's your double time amount to pay on. And then you do the same thing for the time and a half cutoff.
Well, then you know the time and a half is
no,
forego-
you don't. It's because what she said is you could come to work halfway through the time and a half schedule.
Is that true, Christina? Or do they always start at 8?
Right. Yeah. So we usually start 8 to 4. That's our general work hours. So 8 to 4 is standard time. So we not really check in anything between 8 and 4. So the request is really just for overtime. So the request could be anywhere for either a public holiday, and if it's a Sunday, or if it's anytime after 4 till 8 in the morning. So after 4 in one evening till 8 in the morning, that's overtime hours.
Okay, but is that time and a half up until 8 o'clock?
Yeah. So time and a half is from 4 to 8.
Okay, what happens if they start at 5 o'clock?
Right. So then if they start at 5, then their start time will be 5. So they will input that their start time is 5.
Yeah,
so
right.
from 5
Okay.
till whatever time is.
So they get paid time and a half. So then you have to figure out, you have to do the math for the time and a half cutoff to figure out if they started before,
Yeah.
right? And then
Exactly.
and then you got to there's no doubt that you have a difficult calculation ahead, and you're going to have to do it the way that we're describing. You're going to have to I recommend trying to break it down into the minutes so that you can have a single number that you can calculate with. Figure out what your cutoff minutes are for your days, and then do all of the math based on greater than, less than those cutoffs, right? And then after you figure that out, you can count the number of minutes that they were in the time and a half zone, or in the double time zone, or in the regular time zone, and then convert that back to hours, right, to pay them.
Okay. So it's a few if statements then.
Yeah. There's no built-in Power Apps function for that per se. I'm trying to think if there's.
There is some. I've done some.
How often does this happen? I shouldn't say how often does it happen. How many calculations do you need to do every day?
Is just based off of overtime. So like we do SLAs and whatnot, right? So if they need to go out to a customer or do any kind of support after hours, that's when they'll put in the request for overtime hours. So it'll vary.
Yeah. Like one of the things that I was thinking of is like, how do you modularize something like this, right? Because this is the kind of thing that you might want to use in more than one place. And so I might consider like building it into a flow that you could call. Right, you could pass like a start time and an end time, and the flow would give you back either JSON or some sort of result that says this is how much double time, this is how much time and a half, and this is how much regular time, and just do it all in the flow.
Right.
And so
for that,
yeah.
we have right. So that app linked to a flow approval flow, right? And in the approval flow, doing some calculations for the time as well.
Yep.
So I guess I could use probably link that in and send it back to the app.
Yeah, I mean the flow would be a logical place to do it. If you're, that's why I was asking about like, well, how many times do you have to do it in a given day or a week? Like if you have an organization with 50,000 people and they're making, lots of overtime requests, like, well, maybe a flow isn't the best thing to do, but if it's not that many people or it doesn't happen that often, it might not be that big of a deal. The other thing to consider, like, I don't know, what is the ultimate, like what result, where is the result going? What are you doing with the data? Once you do the calculation.
So once it's calculated, it'll go, the flow will now pick it up and send it through an approval process, which will then send it to the accountant to add because that'll be overtime calculations, right? To add it to the extra pay then.
So then it gets sent to payroll, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So the other way that I'm thinking about that you might be able to solve something like this would be take all of this data that you're dealing with and bring it into a Power BI model and do your calculations and math in Power BI or in the semantic model, right? You can do Power Query and all kinds of fun calculations in there. And then after you solve the problem to like generate the correct data using Power BI, then all you have to do is come up with the proper delivery scheme to take that data and get it into the approval process and then over to payroll, which could be like a scheduled report that comes out of Power BI. You could tell your users, go to the Power BI report and export the data and then do something with it. Like there's a few things that you could do there, but the reason I'm saying that is because a complex calculation like that often is more efficiently done in a tool like Power BI.
So rely on Power Apps for the input.
Right.
Rely on something like Power BI for the calculation. Result.
Right. And then I think the difficult thing there is like, how do I connect it to the approval process and then ultimately to payroll? But you can query the Power BI model to get data and do other things with it as well. You might need another license maybe, depending on how you're consuming it, but that would be an option.
No problem. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Christina. All right. I think Bhargav is up next. Want to come off mute and chat?
Hi, Mike. Hi, Mitch.
Hello.
How are you guys?
Doing good.
So we recently started the ALM process for the solutions and Power Platform. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to get your opinion on the publishers. Would you use same publisher for different solutions that are used for same business units, or would you have different publishers for different solutions that are not tied to each other?
Yeah.
But it's used by same business unit.
Yeah, generally. Go ahead. And, finish your question.
Along that question, I'm asking that because also the environment variables. What's the naming convention you use for environment variables? Because I've seen some of the environment variables, the values for it are same across different solutions. For example, SharePoint site, it can be same, but if this publisher is same, then they are the same in both solutions. Yeah. And I need your help think it through and make a right approach towards it.
Yeah, the SharePoint site is an interesting one because that one, if you're like, let's say you're building your Canvas app and you configure your connection as an environment variable, it automatically creates that environment variable for you, and it doesn't give you much opportunity to like name it what you want to name it. And so there is honestly, I think that's a gap, which is a bit of a challenge to overcome if you have multiple SharePoint sites that are being used within the same environment. So then you run into that problem. When it comes to like how I like to function in terms of the publishers and aligning them to solutions or business units. I tend to think of the publishers as being more aligned to business units or departments, let's say, like the part of the organization who's responsible for building, all of the solutions that they might be involved in. And so I would probably create a publisher per business unit or per department. Or you could decide we do everything at an organizational level and just create one at the org level. Where you run into the problem is something like, well, we're going to have multiple solutions from different parts of the organization. And if we all use the same publisher name, and we're using different SharePoint sites in the same environment, then we have a conflict. So that's where you need to take a little bit of caution. To work around that, you could do something like, create a secondary publisher, right? Come up with naming that allows you to distinguish the fact that we're using a secondary publisher to get around that particular issue with the naming. But then I would also be paying attention to what environments you're deploying everything to. So if you're deploying everything to the same environment, that might not be a good idea. One of the things we like to provide guidance on is, first and foremost, if you're building Canvas apps or model-driven apps, probably shouldn't build them in the default environment. I would not do that. And then the second part of that would be something like, if you need ALM, you mentioned ALM, well, we should probably have dev, test, and prod. And so you should at least have that, but then you might also consider the objective or the purpose of the given solution that you're developing, and maybe it should be segmented from other solutions. So if you have multiple solutions, like the SharePoint site, environment variable is a good example, but you may have other scenarios where you want to customize or add fields to a form for, let's say, the contact record. And that might conflict with what somebody else with an alternate solution wants to do on the contact record. And so then you have that conflict to deal with. And so the right solution for that is have multiple environments. And you can integrate between environments. So if you have to shuffle data back and forth between them. But separating things into, purposed environments or shared environments gives you some additional ability to segment in a way that can reduce some of the conflict that you're talking about. So I would look at your solution that way first, but generally speaking, like when we go build something for a customer, we'll go in with our publisher name. I use Bulb, right? That's what I'll use for stuff that we're building solutions for our customers, and that never conflicts with anything else that they're doing. But then if there are other customers that I work for where I'm not building it necessarily as Bulb, I'm building it on their behalf, and so then I honor their department or whatever the business unit is that I'm building the solution for, and I'll carve that out as a publisher name. And
okay,
and more often than not, and sorry, I'm talking a lot. In that scenario in particular, more often than not, there are environments carved out for that specific department as well.
Okay, and do you follow any specific naming convention when you
for environment variables?
For environment variables, that's an interesting one. Like I like to use, like one of the nice things about the Power Platform is that being a no-code, low-code tool, it really gives you a lot of ability to just name things what you want to name them. So you can actually just think about the display name, like what you want to call the thing, and just name it that. And then under the covers or under the hood, it creates a logical name, which is a name that has underscores in it for the spaces or no spaces, right? And it does all that stuff for you. And so to make it easy for the people who are going to come behind me and try to figure out what I did, I like to name things in a user-friendly way. So when I name my environment variables, it might be something like application ID, right? Or SharePoint list name, right? All spaced out, right? And then under the hood, it takes care of the rest of the stuff. Now, the unfortunate thing is that when you go to use those environment variables, it doesn't use the friendly names when you're trying to look them up in your flow and put them in an action. It will use the logical name. And so it's not as pretty, right? So you miss some of the benefit. Maybe one day they'll fix that. But that's generally what I'll do is I'll try to stay as user-friendly as possible. It's a good thing to get a handle on early, especially if you have multiple people working on a particular solution. Call that out the way that you want to do it so that everybody understands it and you don't end up with messy little things that become difficult to remove later on.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Yep.
Cool. Thanks for the question. That's a good segue. Bhargav is a member of our community, so I'll share just a moment about that. If this sort of setting is helpful for you and you're like, I wish I had access all the time and I wish I could just ask questions and see other people that are working on similar things. We have a membership community that we're kind of in a pilot phase for that. If you're interested, we can drop a link in the chat. There we go. Livy's on it. You're welcome to go and check that out, learn a little bit more about our community, and feel free to book a free tour. I can show you around if you're interested in learning more. So would encourage you to go check that out. And while we're on this, feel free, just again, if you're new here, if this is your first time, feel free to drop any questions that you have here in chat. I think we have 2 other questions to go, but then whoever drops the next question will be right behind it. So I forgot early on, Veronica left a question in YouTube and it was above this notification thing in the chat. And so I forgot about it, but I'm going to get to it now. So Veronica asked, how do you convert stream video from WebM to MP4? So just to explain for everyone else, it sounds like a video has been uploaded in her environment as a WebM or whatever format, and it's in stream, and they're watching it, and they want to download it and do something else with it. But when she goes to download it, it comes in as a .webm, which isn't a super friendly format for video. And MP4 is a way more common format. So the question is, how do I get an MP4 instead of that other format? So as far as I can tell, there is no simple way to just say download as this format instead of WebM. The thing that I've seen online that people do is this is a workaround and it's not ideal. If you trim the video slightly and then download it, it downloads as an MP4 because technically Stream is re-transcoding that video into something that is cut up a tiny bit, which is sort of obnoxious. It should be. I wish that was out of the box. But otherwise, I would encourage you to check out, if Benjamin wants to show my screen here, this is a tool that I use all the time. It's called Handbrake. It is super powerful. You just drop your video in there and you pick the format that you want to download it as, and it handles pretty much everything that I throw at it. So it's handbrake.fr is the URL there. So that's one that I use. There's probably tons of other solutions out there.
Clipchamp might be the online tool.
Yeah, I haven't used Clipchamp. I know that's a new acquired tool.
Yeah. That's the default tool. If you go to edit your video in Stream, it does it with Clipchamp. It's slow,
Okay.
especially if you have a big
So
video.
don't take Mike's recommendation. Go download Handbrake, and it's super fast and nice.
It's all relative, right? If you have a large video, even Handbrake, if you got to re-encode the whole thing, video
obviously,
video.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So typically, a non-web product would be superior. You want it running local to your machine.
Depends on
Otherwise, you're relying on someone else's server.
Depends on your machine.
Yeah. So there's a nuanced answer for you there. Glad we could help. Thanks for the question, Veronica. We have a couple others. I saw Brandon Berg left another one. Aaron has a couple there. But the one right before that was from, let me see, his name was Kyle. Left a question about, I'm not sure if this is the type of thing you do, but I'm interested in increasing the security of our Windows 10 devices. Specifically, I'd like to set up Windows Defender application control. Brandon, not Brandon. Kyle, your intuition was correct. This is not the type of thing that we do, unfortunately, which I can talk about the thing that we do. I usually view it as the thing that comes after IT.
Yes.
So this is, I would regard as an IT function.
It is, and I would tell you to look at Purview, formerly Intune.
Okay.
And I'm assuming your devices are managed and logged into your domain, and then you can actually control what's going on.
So Mike knows some things, but we don't.
I won't let you pay me to do it.
No, right. So that's maybe a not super helpful answer, but unfortunately we don't know a ton about that. Sorry, we couldn't help you there. Go check out Purview. Okay. The rest, Brandenburg left another question. What type of value are you getting out of M365 Copilot? Has it become something you're growing to find you can't live without? Another good question. So we actually just did a webinar about it this morning, or Matt Dressel and Emma did one this morning all about Copilot and what we're getting value out of. We have that available on demand, which I can grab the link to here in a minute. But and we're actually going to be recording a podcast about it this afternoon. But it's a good topic. There's tons to dive into and different ways to think about it. How I would articulate it is there are things that Copilot does really great and has completely replaced some of our responsibility in our daily work. And there are some things that it is not even close. It is an absolute poor attempt at replicating what we might do. So particularly things around meetings, transcribing meetings, giving readouts, action items, things about meetings is great. It does a pretty good job of the term Matt's been using is interrogating things. So hey, I have this document. Tell me what this document says about this thing. And it can go in and kind of infer things and give you a readout of that. Things of that nature are great. I found it doesn't do quite as good with the creative marketing type stuff because it's largely grounded in your tenant and the data inside your Microsoft tenant. It's more of a business voice than it is a creative voice. But I think that's the core. The main things that we're relying on it for heavily is meetings. We turn on transcription in every meeting now. And instead of taking detailed notes all the time, nothing against detailed notes. If you're a note taker, it's great way to remember things. But for me, I just as soon not take them. Yeah. And all of a sudden it delivers you a recap afterwards. And
I never took notes.
Great.
I never took notes anyways. And so now I get notes. It's a huge bonus for me. I always, for the relationship, having a conversation with a person, right, is always the most important thing to me. And now you can actually do that. Even for the people that like to take notes, you can focus on the other people in the discussion.
Yeah.
To a much greater extent.
Yeah. There's someone should bring it to a class. It should take their school notes for them. I bet they could do that. I hated taking notes in class too.
I know, but see, I never took notes in class.
Yeah, we're maybe exceptions. But yeah, particularly for our compliance-minded folks here, it is great to just rely on Copilot to do that. Yeah. So I think I had a video recently about it where I was that in itself sold Copilot to me. I'll pay the monthly price just for that feature.
That. Yeah, I think it saves a bunch of time. If you run meetings, it's a lifesaver.
Yep. Outside of that,
some of the
can be helpful.
You mentioned, we talked about Planner earlier. Wouldn't it be great if that thing could go put tasks in a Planner board at the end of a meeting? Right?
It can if you pay for a Project Plan 3 license. It's obnoxious. The way that they were referencing it does sound really helpful, but they're mucking it up with a bunch of license stuff. Anyway, yeah, I would encourage you. I have a video about it, and we'll drop the link to the on-demand webinar for you. And then, yeah, thanks for the question. We have another question. Well, this is just a follow-up from, I keep forgetting the name, Kyle. Kyle asked, thanks, guys. Is there a company that you would refer us to for M365 security work?
Well, if you're in West Michigan,
Maybe.
yeah. I have friends at a company called Hungerford Technologies. They're in West Michigan. They might be outside of West Michigan now, too, but they have a good team of folks over there that understand that type of stuff.
Speaking of, like, hey, if you're an IT company and you're like, hey, I like those bulb people, feel free to connect with us and maybe we can chat. But we don't have anyone default that we're like, anyone that asks us for this, go to these people. Because we don't do it. A lot of companies that we work with have internal IT.
Or they have another managed service provider already.
Right.
That they don't do the other things that we do, right? That
Yeah.
revolve around SharePoint and communication and collaboration.
And so the only way we work with them is like, hey, get me access to this stuff. And so it's hard to be like, from a business perspective, they're the correct one to implement these. Like we don't necessarily always get that perspective. But let's move on to Aaron's question. Aaron M. on YouTube asks, what type of value are you getting out of,
wrong question.
this has perplexed me for a bit, but why, when you go to the connections page, are there many duplicate connections, and is there any way to clean it up without breaking things? For instance, I only have one Dataverse connection, only having one Dataverse connection instead of having 6 or 8.
Yeah, so this is a really good question. So I assume you're probably working in something like Power Automate. Every flow that you create in Power Automate, let's start with, I'm creating flows outside of a solution. When you do that, every flow that you create and you create an action, let's say that's going to get data from Dataverse, like list rows or update data in SharePoint, is going to create a connection that then gets reused for other actions within that same flow. But then when you go create the next flow and you connect to Dataverse and you're still not in a solution, it's likely going to create a new connection. So that's likely the reason that you see that. The unfortunate thing about those connections is that they're often difficult to tell apart. And to the extent, like, they're named the same and you're like, oh, I don't know which one to get rid of, which is your question about, like, how do I clean it up? One of the things you can do is I think you can go to the connections and you can actually look at the dependencies to see what apps or what flows are using them. And so then you could potentially use that as a way to go seek out those flows and those apps. And the next thing that you would do is you'd need to decide if you wanted to bring those things into a solution and start to use connection references. So if you're doing things in the default environment, you're probably not using solutions. And so then you have this problem. If you're a little bit more advanced in your Power Platform development knowledge, you might know a little bit about solutions. We have a number of videos out there that talk about solutions and how they can be used. But once you create a flow inside of a solution, there are a number of additional things you can do. And one of those things which Power Automate will actually prescribe to you right in the flow while you're editing it is it will say, hey, you're using connections, you should be using connection references. And click here and to swap them out right now. And so basically what that means is when you start to use a connection reference, then you're creating a connection reference that's inside the solution, right alongside your flows and your apps and your other things that are part of the same solution. And then the idea is that you can pick up that entire solution and deploy it to another environment. And on the way into that environment, you can specify a new connection for that environment that's going to be connected to that connection reference, which then plumbs all of your apps and your flows. So that's the intent behind that. But once you do that, then you can get this, basically you can consolidate your connections into a much smaller set because you're using those connection references to use them. So anything you build inside that same solution, you'll have that same connection reference for Dataverse, and you won't be, when you create another action that connects to Dataverse, it won't be creating a new connection. So the real answer is, like, if you can start from this with a solution mindset, start there and you'll minimize the problem going forward. But then once you're in that situation, you need to go look at each of those connections, look at their dependencies, and then go ask yourself, should these things be in a solution or not? Yeah. And you can, like, I've gone through the exercise of deleting connections and then figuring out what's broken, what you have to go fix. And it depends on how extensive that damage might be as to whether or not you want to exercise that muscle. But yeah.
It's a good cause, though, right?
It's a good cause. It's a pain, because I know exactly what she's talking about. And
I think you wanted to say something other than pain right then.
no, it's a pain.
No, that's great. So connection references instead of connections.
Right, which
is
means
the key.
you need to be in a solution.
Cool. Aaron says, I think I'll just live with the mess then. LOL. All righty. Cool. Yeah, thanks for that question. We do have a couple others. Let me see. So we have one from Kaylin in Teams and then Brandon in YouTube. I'm going to go back to Kaylin in Teams first. The question is, can you send emailed PDFs from data in Power Apps, both model-driven and Canvas apps, to external contacts? Bonus if it can be signed in an email. We've generated PDFs before.
Yeah, the short answer is yes.
Okay.
The signature thing depends on what you might mean by signature.
Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. But we don't we like create a Word doc that's a template that you can then use as
So the pseudo code, the pseudo low code for this is something like start with a Word document as your template, create it in OneDrive for Business under preferably a service account user, not your own personal user, and put the content into the document, right? There's a few different ways you can do that. And then within that same OneDrive for Business connection, if you will, there's an action that will let you convert the Word document to a PDF. And so then you'll start with a Word document in your OneDrive, and then it will create a PDF that's a copy of it in your OneDrive. And then you have a PDF that you can actually send somewhere via email or whatever method you want, and it can easily be sent to an external email address. That's not a problem at all. Thoughts on the signature piece of it?
Yeah. Well, I was just noticing we only have like 6 minutes left. So let's get through these. If you have any last minute questions, drop them in and we'll try to get to them. But the signature, we just tried out Microsoft Syntax signature, which worked well. It's a signature service right within SharePoint where you can basically open a PDF
Request
and
a
click
signature.
get signatures, and then you configure the fields, similar to like DocuSign. I have no idea if there's a way to do that with like the Power Platform, or like tap into that with the Power Platform.
I doubt that there is.
Yeah.
One of my frustrations with figuring out how to use it for the first time was you actually have to open the document.
Yeah.
And that's where the menu to request the signature is, because what it actually asks you to do is to place a token or a
placeholder
onto the location in the document where you want their signature or them to date it, for example. And so you have to have the document open like in the web, like my PDF, to make that happen. And that's how you request the signature. So in that scenario, it's literally like every single document is a one-off signature request. Mm-hmm. There's no template that you can then just go say, give me signatures on it. So in that
hopefully we can add yet to the end of all this stuff.
Yeah, it's not a full-on DocuSign type solution.
No, and it is relatively expensive compared to other maybe more bulk licensed ones. I think it's like $2 per signature.
Yep.
Which for us is like we don't go through that many of them, so it's
not that big of a
fine.
deal.
But
yeah, but I think the immediate answer, like the solution for that, would be to look outside of the Microsoft Power Platform for a solution, and it would pay for something like DocuSign, which you can integrate with from the Power Platform. So you would generate your PDF, put it in a location, and then you could initiate a DocuSign process to collect signatures on it. And then once the DocuSign process is complete, you basically wait on that to happen, and then you can send it to another person, right? And so it's a full integration of all of those pieces.
Cool. Thanks for the question. I think the last one that we can... Yeah, Kaylin says, thank you. No problem at all. Brandon, it's more of a comment than a question, but the nickel and dime add-on license from Microsoft is a challenge for sure, especially as they keep adding things and seem to be figuring out how models/products interact as they go. I could not agree more. You have no idea the like sense of relief. If I could buy a Microsoft 365 premium license to just not have to think about another license ever,
What would that be worth to you?
it might be worth more than I would pay individually for them. If I think about it long enough, like to literally not have to worry about that is so valuable. Because anytime they're like, click here to upgrade, click here to upgrade, I've been saying it's friction.
If you added them all up
I
today
need to talk
see,
to IT. I need to get approval. Who else needs this? This needs to go through procurement now. And
are you excluding the Dynamics apps?
I don't care. The simpler you can make it, whatever. This is not, I live in a world where it is not what more can I add to this thing? It's what more can I take away? How can I make this simpler, easier? Take it away, please, Microsoft.
Yeah,
If you're listening, we want it to be simple. And they don't have a wrong perspective either. I'm not trying to say that. What they're trying to do is say, hey, everyone doesn't have to pay for all the things that they don't use. You can just a la carte grab things as you want them.
Yeah, I think that like part of their answer to this though is something like the E3 versus the E5 and the right.
Which those all make complete sense to everyone, right?
But that's their current solution to that problem.
Yeah, but now there's SharePoint Premium. There's so many levels that they're asking people, and there's like 80 different things within Dynamics. Like,
Well, that's why you have to hire IT.
yeah, and then they have a partner network who walks you through and helps buy licenses for you and gets a cut of them. And it's unfortunate. I don't know. We're sort of like we don't drink. We drink the Kool-Aid a little bit, but like not a full glass sometimes. So
I mean,
I wish it was simpler.
That of all of the things that we navigate, that's one of the ones that we have spent countless hours on that I wish we didn't have to.
Yeah.
Helping people sort that out.
I know the amount of times where like Power Apps is like, they're too expensive or Dataverse is too expensive. Should I buy a per app license or a per user? Like, come on.
Yeah, and then that feeds a narrative that's something like, well, it's too expensive, and so then I don't even want to try.
Yeah, or
You know?
they just have processes internally that are not worth navigating through that adds to a cost of time spent convincing, persuading, getting IT to finally allow us to use the things we need to use. Yeah. Anyway, I'll get off that soapbox. Sorry. Brandon is picking good ones for me today to go off about.
He's setting you up.
But you can count on us to give you objective perspectives on all of this. Last thing before we go, Kaylin says, I've looked at Odoo before. They recently changed it to that, which is a big selling feature for me. That is what makes me unsure of which Power Apps method to use.
I think she's talking about the licensing.
Or
that we were just talking about.
the signature. Maybe it's signature. Yeah, she was the one talking about the signature.
She was, but I think she was paying attention to like what's
Okay.
up. License.
No license.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
Gotcha.
So they put everything into a single license, as opposed to.
That's wild that they can make a business model on abstracting someone else's licensing model. That's something. Okay, we're right up 9 seconds. Jen's left a last one, I promise. Is it still worth learning Power Platform as a Power Platform developer? Not now that Copilot is available for citizen developers.
Yes.
With that, folks. Yeah.
Copilot from the Power Platform standpoint, Copilot can be very useful in generating like little code snippets and things like that for you. And there's even some AI now that lets you like build an app from a sketch on a napkin and stuff like that, or from Figma and some other tools, which that's helpful to get like a prototype up and running really quick. But
It's not autopilot.
It's not
It's
autopilot.
Copilot. That's what we say.
Yeah. Somebody just said that today. There's a whole lot of things that you need to know and do in the Power Platform that Copilot's not going to do for you, like how to structure your solutions and things like that. You're just not going to get the full thing that you need or should do out of Copilot alone.
Cool. Thanks for the last minute question there. We got a roll. Jen says, thanks. Appreciate the explanation. That makes sense. Awesome. Glad to help. This is what we're here for. We would love to know, hey, if we were able to help you, we're going to drop a link in the chat where you can drop a little shout out for us. We'd love to hear your feedback, and it's just great to hear when we're able to help people. So would encourage you to fill that out. And we will be back here on May 1. It's only 3 weeks away. Normally we're like 4+ weeks away. So not too long. Would encourage you to go out there and register for that. We can drop a link to the next event there as well. So couple places for you to go check out. Last thing, if you lead an organization and you want to improve your communication and you're like, I feel like I'm just yelling into the noise and we're stuck in this email world and there's drama and back channels and all this stuff. We have a lot of thoughts about that. We wrote a guidebook about it. We're super excited about it. We'll drop a link to that. So that is hopefully your guide to a more connected team. So would encourage you to go check that out. We even have a free course available for that as well. So I think that's all I got today. Mike, thanks for hanging out. Everyone, thanks for joining. Hopefully we'll see you again next time.
It was a good one. Thanks, Mitch.